Fantasy disc golf is finally here. And in this video, I'll be telling you who I think are going to be the top 10 fantasy disc golfers in 2022. Fantasy sports is not always going to be about getting the 10 most talented players, though that helps. You're going to have to draft a team that works well together to perform better than other teams. So even though somebody may have more individual talent than others, they may be lower on the list based on their circumstances or how I feel that they're going to fit within the fantasy disc golf landscape. Let's hop into my top 10 players in this year's 2022 draft. The 101 is pretty obviously 2021 Player of the Year, Ricky Wysocki. Oh, you guys want an explanation? I didn't think I had to do that, but with the first pick of the draft, you cannot go wrong with 2021 Player of the Year. He was consistent throughout the entire season, taking down the most wins, the best top 5 percentage. The man was on fire, and even switching plastic, going over to dynamic discs, I do not see him having a down year. He should be at the top of the leaderboards all year long, and it's going to be a fantastic pick for whoever gets him in that first spot. At the 102, right behind him, the GOAT, Paul McBeth. Again, fantasy sports, we're talking about placement is the scoring, and Paul McBeth was tied for the second most wins on tour last year and sported the third best top 5 percentage. We all know him. He's super consistent no matter what courses he's playing on, which is a huge benefit when it comes to fantasy sports, not having that liability in his game. We can absolutely expect McBeth to continue his dominance and have a great 2022 season and be a stud in fantasy disc golf. So the two big names are out of the way. Here are where things get interesting. At the 1.03, I have Calvin Heimburg. Now, before you come hating at me in the comments, let me explain. He finished second best in two of the most important categories, top 5 percentage and average finished in Disc Golf Pro Tour events. And even though Heimburg hasn't released his schedule for the 2022 season yet, I don't foresee him missing too many events this year, locking him into the number 3 spot on my list. Dickerson gets plugged into my 104. He's super consistent on both open and wooded courses, which makes him a great play from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. He as well is switching manufacturers, so he might start off the year a little bit slower on those open courses since they aren't necessarily his strength. But once he finds his groove, he's going to be one of the most consistent guys in your lineup. So drafting him at the 104 is going to give you a nice, steady competitor that's going to be a top finisher week in and week out. This was not the Discmania player that you were probably expecting to be in this spot. Kyle Klein is my pick for the 105. Klein takes the leap over McMahon for me in this spot, purely based on McMahon's lack of tournament play and injury history coming into the 2022 season. Fantasy sports is about availability, and Klein is going to be playing in 4 more events than Eagle this year. That's a lot of points that they're going to be missing from McMahon. He can go off for wins pretty easily and doesn't actually drop down that far when it comes to his bad tournaments. And that's what gives Klein the edge for me. He's also very, very good. So that helps too. With great hesitation, I am now putting Eagle at my number 6 spot. Now, a lot of you probably had him a little higher on your lists, which talent-wise, I completely understand. But fantasy sports, it's a different ballgame. It's known that Eagle is also might be taking it a little bit easy on his forehand, and he is still recovering from his injury at the end of last season. With that and the lack of tournaments, he's dropped down my list a little bit. Eagle is a great player, and on those open golf courses, he's going to be fantastic. But I just feel like he's going to be a liability in your lineup when it comes to those more wooded courses. And if you can't play him, he's sitting on your bench giving you 0 points. Again, he deserves to be top 5 when talking about talent. But in fantasy sports, I have my reservations this year. Prodigy's top guy is next on my list. Kevin Jones is at the 107. Jones is one of the players putting all of their chips into the Disc Golf Pro Tour basket, as right now his schedule has 0 Silver Series events listed on it. Jones was one of the few players last year where their average finish actually got better when taking off the Silver Series events, which is huge because it looks like most fantasy disc golf sites are only going to be following the Disc Golf Pro Tour events. On top of that, if he can duplicate his 8 top 5 finishes he had last year, he'll be a steady scorer in your lineup, even though he may have a lower floor than some of the other guys on this list. At the 108, I'm going with Matty O. Matty O is taking on a bigger schedule here in 2022, which is one of the reasons why I've bumped him up in my ranking this year. At the 108, you're getting somebody who actually finished 6th best in average finish on Disc Golf Pro Tour events. His low bogey percentages keeps him from dropping out of the top 20 very often. Adam Hammes is getting the 109 spot for me. Popping onto the season last year with a couple of wins, he's shown us what he really can do out there on tour. Last year, he only fell outside of the top 20 4 times, and I feel like he can have a repeat season in 2022. His ability to get hot and go for that win with the steadiness of not falling too far outside of that competitive group is going to be huge for anybody who gets him. And who knows, he's still pretty new to the tour and take another step up and maybe jump into that top tier of fantasy disc golfers. Rounding out my top 10 is Drew Gibson, who actually doesn't finish outside the top 10 himself very often. He had the seventh lowest percentage of tournaments where he finished outside of the top 10. When scoring is all based on placement, single digit finishes is king, and that's what Drew Gibson does. Now, in no particular order, here are a couple of guys that I was thinking about sneaking into that 109 to 110 spot. We had James Conrad, who is a steady competitor. He probably won't jump out for a win very often, or even a top 5, but he's going to be super steady for your roster. We've got Andrew Marweed. He's a little bit of a riskier pick, but he had numerous top 5 finishes last year, and is on everybody's short list to have another great season. A couple of riskier guys, but I think do really well on Disc Golf Pro Tour events specifically. We've got Simon Lizotte, Garrett Gurthie, and even Nate Sexton. It looks like Nate Sexton is going to be playing a little bit more full tour this year, which is going to be helpful for his fantasy value. Garrett Gurthie is again one of those guys that his average finish actually goes up playing Disc Golf Pro Tour events versus the Silver Series events. And then Simon Lizotte's one of those players. He is missing some time, which actually bumped him out of my top 10. But even with a shortened season last year, his average finish was 16th overall, and that was coming off an injury, and so I expect him to continue getting back into his old self, and should see him pop off on a couple of tournaments this year. So there you have it. There's my top 10 fantasy disc golfers for 2022. Please let me know where I'm wrong. I'll try to prove where I'm right. I'm excited that fantasy disc golf is finally a thing, and that we can all take part and build a community around it. If you have any questions about your specific drafts, please reach out. I'm open to answer any questions you have about strategy or anything like that. I will have multiple videos coming out this coming week, so watch out for those. We're going to do some sneaky picks, some guys to watch out for that I don't like this year. I've got a couple of great nuggets, I think, to maybe get a couple of steals in your draft and beat out your buddies. So please like and subscribe if you're still watching this. I appreciate you guys taking the time to come along